This is Pamela Schneider. I'm the retail editor for Blue Book Services, and this is the Produce Reporter Week in Review. No sweaters today, but I've got my Christmas mug. You got to believe in something.
That's nice. I'm going to celebrate the return of the border war, which is when Kansas and Missouri play each other in sports, something that hasn't happened in a decade because Missouri went to the SEC, but they are playing this Saturday.
You know, I almost feel like I should go find some Mizzou gear. Just a heads up would have been nice to get myself ready with the props, but that's okay. I disassociated with Mizzou when they made that change to the SEC, but I am a Mizzou alumna. But this week in the Week in Review, we had a lot of grocery news again. Thursday's newsletter was a ridiculous amount of growth in vertical farming as well. So if you are looking for the vertical farm update, let's see. On one hand, we've got Gotham Green's West Coast. We've got Iron Ox has a new robot named Phil. We've got Square Roots is expanding with Spartan Nash. And what else? Just too much.
The West Coast one?
Yeah, the West Coast. That was Gotham Green's going to the West Coast. A ridiculous amount of vertical farm news. Abby Pryor with Bright Farms elevated to a new position with that company. I have some Bright Farms lettuce down in my fridge right now that they kindly sent me because we need more salad in our lives, just like everyone else does. But speaking of things that everyone else needs more of in their lives, is it ugly produce? I'm not sure.
You wrote a column and it got a lot of traffic. Ugly produce is such a weird thing to consider. And it's really hard to get your head around it because the concept is solid. It doesn't have to be beautiful to be nutritious and good, but we are all consumers. And why should we buy something we perceive as inferior?
Yeah, it's really hard because the art that I made for this story was actually chopped up carrots, and it says nobody knows these weren't perfect. Because that's the weird thing about ugly vegetables in particular, is that most of the time a vegetable does not stay ugly. It becomes little tiny pieces.
Ultimately that's the solution, is ugly produce turns into fresh cut and frozen.
Right. So this new study, some research from the Ohio State University, I really enjoyed reading through it. It's coming up in the Journal of Retailing and Consumer Sciences. And what I liked about it was they are doing some research on the profitability of ugly produce and different marketing strategies for taking it to market and getting the most return for growers. What's the maximum that consumers are willing to pay? Is there a threshold of mixing up ugly versus not ugly? And the mentality behind buying ugly produce. Unfortunately, I think for those of us in the business part of the produce industry, their findings were that ugly produce sells best when you educate consumers at the farmer's market.
Right, it gets to consumer perception, and that's when you go to a farmer's market, you expect a different kind of experience than a grocery store. You expect things to be beautiful in a grocery store, and you don't expect them to be that way in a farmer's market. The reality, of course, we know is that many of the things that go to farmer's market can also go to retail, and it tends to be the higher quality stuff from the same place for less often at retail because it costs, because they can charge, they can charge more at farmers markets. And of course, the worst case scenario is farmers markets that are supplied by a local wholesaler.
Right.
I see all the time, unfortunately.
Right. But what really cracks me up about this study is they did it about carrots, and carrots are like the poster child for ugly produce because you can have the little squatty weird carrots. I mean, at Thanksgiving, I had a carrot that was two-legged or whatever on our veggie tray. But you know what? I chopped everything up into a bomb awesome veggie tray, by the way. My grandparents and my aunts and uncles are in love with watermelon radishes. They had never had them and they had never heard of them before. And meanwhile, I've been to where they grow at Val Verde Vegetable down in the valley. But but when we talk about carrots, how do you buy your carrots generally, Greg? Do you buy in a bag?
Most often I buy baby carrots that are are beautiful and fresh cut and easy to eat. But every once in a while, we'll buy the regular bag, but it's so cheap and they look great. And so the question is, what would ugly look like? Anytime, I mean, at Hy-Vee, they're famous for having their ugly produce display. And I know we've reported that most consumers will see that, like that it's there, and not buy it thinking it's for someone else. I'm that way too.
I mean, I actually don't see as often, although after this column went out, I had a few emails sent to me of people who are still seeing ugly produce sold at retail and marketed as such. But I don't really see, other than the markdown bin, like Lidl has its too good to waste markdowns. I'm not seeing a separate SKU for so-called ugly produce anymore. But when we talk about bagged carrots, I've gotten two-tailed carrots, I've gotten weird shaped carrots, I've gotten broken carrots in a bag. Do I mind? No. And the consumers in this study are fine with, I think it was up to 40 to 60% of the carrots in their bag being ugly, and they would pay the same price for it. So I think that retail buyers could loosen up on the specs, first of all. Does it matter that your cauliflower is this big instead of this big? Not really. If you're selling it by the pound, it matters not one bit. Actually, someone might be more attracted to a smaller head of cauliflower. So there are some chances and some opportunities in there that maybe we need to rethink specs at retail and allow this stuff and not be selling it as a cheaper version. If you've got a smaller head of cauliflower, sell it by the pound. And just, you know, it's a smaller ring for that. And I know that you're going to make more money on the larger one. And yes, there's economics on that stuff. But let's give people options and see what sells, because why not? I mean, you don't have to sell it marketed as ugly is all I'm saying, because I really don't think that the return on investment and the return on the feel goodness of all of that is there. I'm so skeptical of that ugly produce display because I see it. You see it. The ugliest apple is the last one left. The lime that split, that's actually two limes in one, is always the last one left. So there is that people do buy perfect stuff in general, but when it's packaged, when it's bagged, whatever, people don't care. I don't think they care as much anymore.
Well, you certainly can't guilt them into buying it, because guilting doesn't work for getting them to eat more produce in general. So it's not going to work for getting them to buy uglier stuff.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of businesses that have done really well over the last couple of years. Imperfect Produce, for example, and Misfits Market is another one that are nationwide. They're selling off-spec stuff oftentimes, but they've also expanded their business model. It's not just produce anymore. It's not just so-called ugly stuff. It's a lot of rejects and things like that, but it's also they've expanded into full-service grocery. I think for me, that's kind of proving that you can't only make your business on just selling imperfect stuff. You actually have to have like a larger selection of things and more out of it than just a box of nubby carrots. But moving on.
Yeah, so the next thing, all right, so in addition to would you buy ugly produce, would you pay to have your groceries delivered in 10 minutes? Because a lot of people are apparently starting to do that.
Well, apparently they are. I mean, it seems like every other week we've got another news release, and we had two this week of ultra fast grocery delivery expanding into New York and Chicago and places like that. This week we saw Grubhub and Getter. Those are two 10 to 15 minute grocers that are expanding, and I can't even fathom ordering something online and having it show up in 10 minutes. I mean, Amazon's pretty fast for me. I can sometimes get stuff, you know, I order it at noon and it shows up by the end of the day. But I can't even hop in my car, and I live in the burbs, like a mile from HEB, and I can't get there and back in 10 minutes. But it seems like a whole lot of investment is going into these businesses. So somebody's making money on it, or are they?
Well, we don't know yet because it's just investments. But with Getter, I mean, they have a successful model other places in the world. They're based in Turkey. I guess it seems to me, if you lived in a big city, something like this certainly could work. I joke, if I'm making a recipe, if my wife or kids are making a recipe and run out of eggs, what do? would we call someone and deliver it in 10 minutes? Well, first we go to a neighbor. But I guess people in New York are different because everyone hates each other there.
Everyone hates each other there, and they're okay with paying the delivery. I can't even fathom the cost of having something delivered in 10 minutes. It's got to be, it can't be just the retail costs that you would get out of that. To have riders at the ready with their little bikes and their little backpacks or whatever. The other one is the bike, BUYK, the Russian company that is expanding in the US. That we have a nice chuckle at their name. But to do that, because when I forget something, I either like ask Alexa what else I could use, or I hop in the car and go and get it and come right back, because it'll take me 20 minutes to get in and out of HEB because I live so close to one. It just seems like the potential market for this does not justify all of the money that's going into developing these. But I'm not, I guess, investment experts, because a lot of people think this is really going to get somewhere, getting your groceries in 10 minutes. But if you really don't want to wait 10 minutes, what else can you do? You can go to a restaurant, get takeout, right?
Well, increasingly, you're not going to a restaurant and sitting down.
No. And there were numbers that came out of Deloitte this week on the future of restaurants and what they've seen over the last 2 years that are just jaw-dropping. 2 years ago, 18% of consumers surveyed ordered delivery or takeout at least once a week. And now that is 61%. 61% of people order takeout or delivery at least once a week.
More than tripled in 2 years is amazing. Like, that is something that you have to work into your business model.
Yes. If restaurants aren't optimizing their menu options for best flavor, best shelf life, whatever you would call it, your food experience in a takeout format, if you aren't really dialing it in on your menu items, you're going to miss out, because they said almost 2/3 of consumers do not plan to return to their pre-pandemic habits in the next 6 months. So we're just going to see more people doing takeout and delivery. I mean, I've done takeout more than I ever have in my life in the last 2 years. What the type of restaurant that I see that is the busiest all the time is the drive-through. Those guys are just killing it, and as far as customer demand, and it's not going to change. But if you think about everything on their menu is optimized to eat in your car or to take home and eat, and not have to have that in restaurant dining experience. So outrageous numbers coming out of Deloitte.
Well, it makes sense with all the reporting we've done of ghost kitchens and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, although you did send me that Wall Street Journal article last week about Reef, I think it was, the ghost kitchen company that's having some issues with permits and safety and some of the stuff. It turns out you can't just drop a trailer and crank out food all day long and consider it, to be a permanent restaurant location with the same kind of, permanent safety things that we have going on with an actual brick and mortar building. So I'm sure we're going to see some growing pains in these ghost kitchen places. And perhaps the model is not necessarily a trailer in a Boost Mobile parking lot, and it's more like a commissary kind of kitchen like you see in the UK, where you've got a dozen different restaurants all cooking from the same place, and then a fleet of delivery folks picking up from 10 different restaurants and delivering from there. I'm sure the industry is going to figure that out, but some really fascinating stuff to follow this week. And you will have to read the rest of it at producebluebook.com or get it in the Produce Reporter newsletter, because that's it for the Produce Reporter Week in Review. MIZZOU.
No. All Jayhawks.